start talking about how to get you guys ramped up and understanding Gigante, Capofero, and some of the period manuals. I want to touch on some things that are basic, you're doing it wrongs throughout the SCA, and that's going to lead then into streamering and blade control. We'll get to that in a little bit. But first off, I just want to start off with a few things that we need to correct before we even get to blade control. Jeff, take a stance real quick. All right. I want you guys being not you, certainly not you, and not her, to try and tell me two things that's wrong with this stance, with the exchange between the two of us. There are two humongous things wrong right now.
We're leaving your center open.
Okay, very good. What is the other one? All right, exactly. So, the problem is this. If Jeff and I start here, this is turned into a gunfight.
Yep.
The end result is going to be who's fastest and most accurate, and even then, we're both probably going to die.
Yeah, we will.
Right. So, one of the things I see happening throughout HEMA, throughout the SCA, is people start, if you find yourself practicing at cross blade level, you're doing it wrong. If you can get to the where, so right now I'm holding a 45, I don't even need to bend my leg to hit Jeff. So if you're getting to where you can actually hit your opponent without taking a step, you are starting too close, okay? There are three distances in general. There is narrow measure. Narrow measure is I can hit my opponent without taking a step. There is long measure, wide measure, which is I have to actually take a step to hit my opponent. And then there is out of measure. We want to start every fight out of measure, all right? The whole thing about tactics is once you start entering into measure, it's on. And that's when your tactics start playing in. If you start in measure, you've already blown all of your tactics to hell. Does that make sense? So I'll be looking for that tonight. That's the first thing I want you guys to take out of this. Do not, in any situation, start at narrow distance. I would even say when you're drilling, start your drilling out of distance so that you and your opponent can get used to each other stepping in on each other, okay?
And if you were a marshal, make sure you have enough field that they can start out of measure.
Yeah, oh God. Okay, started. Postage stamp fields drive me crazy.
Sorry, senior marshal stepped in.
Oh yeah, no. So that's one of the things. We'll get to the other thing in a minute. Something else I want to talk about. If I'm fighting and I make a mistake with my hand, or if I make a mistake with my foot, which is the easiest to recover from? Screwing up my hand or screwing up my foot?
Hand.
Are we all in agreement here? All right. The manuals say the timing of the hand is quicker than the timing of the foot. And what that really translates into is I can recover from my hand mistake a lot faster than I can recover from that foot mistake. So when we're fighting, if I try and feint him with my hand, from his point of view, he shouldn't do anything really huge if I'm doing a weird hand thing. What he's trying to do is get me to do a big foot thing, and that's when he should take advantage and take my tempo. So, time of the hand is faster than time of the foot, which is also why when we're lunging, the hand is what goes first. The foot is what follows. Okay? If I'm moving with my foot first, I have not yet cleared the line with my sword, he should be pezzing me. Does that make sense too? All right. Playing at distance, using your hands to figure out your opponent before you commit with that foot is one of the first big tactics to start working through. All right. To this point, any questions that anyone has? That is my intro to let's start doing this stuff. Going back to one of the other things that we just said was wrong. If Jeff and I are here, how do I make this better? Let me back it up to distance. How do I make this better? We are aiming at each other. No one has the advantage. How do I get the advantage here?
Extend your arm.
Extend?
Because then you're placing his.
Okay. This is the gist of what I'm here to do. The way I can take advantage now is to stringer his blade. Right now, we can both, if we both lunge to each other, we're both dead ducks. If I'm stringering his blade and he lunges at me, I don't care. I've knocked him off range. Even if I don't actually touch his blade and I'm just floating over it, if he comes at me, all I've got to do is move my hand, the fastest thing, and I've got it covered. This is called stringering. This is one of the most useful things I think you can ever use. And it has multiple reasons for that. But the first one is, I can take the time to figure him out if I'm protected from his sword. So as I have him moving around, I can now close in close enough to hit him. But at the very least, if we close on each other and then I've got him covered, I have a moment here to think through things while I'm still safe until he decides to move somewhere else. Especially in HEMA, winning fights just simply includes covering their blade, making them make a stupid mistake, and hitting them. All right? So this is what I'm here to talk to you about, is blade control. First off, how to do it, how not to do it. Then, things that you can do with it. Tactics that leads into. All right? The way I teach, the way I stand, straight out of Capofero usually, but stringering is also useful when you're in a forward stance or even when you're just in a neutral stance. Make sure you are not aiming at your opponent's offhand side. Make sure you're aiming at their sword side. Unless you go to the outside, then you're aiming at their offside because you're crossing their blade while you're doing it. All right? Think about how to do this next. First off, again, any questions? Is this fairly clear? All right. So put together two things real quick. Jeff aims his sword at me. He can't hit me from there. I can't hit him from there. They call lay on. What I'm going to do is just barely cross my tip, floating over his blade. This is when we start now thinking or working toward each other, figuring out what we're going to do, how we're going to make sure that now he has my line, I have his line, I have his, he has mine. This is where the fencing starts happening. All right? I want you guys to pair up. We're going to do very simple drills right now, which is starting out of distance, stepping just into distance, and stringering. It sounds simple and stupid, but I'm going to come behind and look at all of you, and we're going to have little discussions about how this works. Grab someone, please.
Can I follow you around and record what you're saying?
If you really want to. Yes, sure. Stand up, thank you. Now, take stance against each other. What I want to make sure of is that there's space between these blades. This side is going to take a step in, cross just the tips, and then stringer your opponent and stop. Okay? So go ahead and move in. What you're looking to do is your sword is going to aim past their sword shoulder. You're going to be on the inside. This creates, there you go, this creates a nice little pocket that you're putting their point into. All right? That's what I want. Now, the other part of stringering is you want to get more of your blade on them than they have on yours. If you're just touching their blade with your tip, they actually have the stronger position. So the whole point is mechanical advantage. Excellent. Step back out, let the other side do the same thing. You're just going to step in, cross the tip over, and stringer. Aim over their blade to their shoulder. Good.
A little more blade. There we go.
Good. Now technically, some of the manuals say you should not be touching blades. You should be floating. Make sure you cross over that. There you go. You want to create this pocket here that this point is resting. Okay?
Hey, do you want to switch?
Hold on a second. Let me step in real quick. So one of the things that he is now doing correct, as he stepped in, he canted his blade slightly. If I come to the other side of his blade, not so far, just angle a little bit. What I want you to do is whatever side they're blade on, I want you to cant your true edge to that side. You're creating what I call a pocket, this little L, that I want that tip to be somewhere in this L. If you're flat to flat, you're still doing okay, but this is a much better position, and we'll talk about why in a little bit. All right? So once again, this side, step forward, cant your blade as you go into a stringer. Try to float above their blade, try not to touch it. Good. Excellent. All right, take a step back. Now we're going to do the same thing on the outside line. So this side is going to take stance. This side's got to step in on the outside line, stringer the blade, aiming at the offhand shoulder. Okay? Whoops. Go ahead and step in, cross that blade. Try not to touch the blade if you can. And you're aiming. Yes, that's right. That's correct. So you got the strength of the mechanics. You got the strength of the angle. Good. Bam. All right. As I'm letting go of that stringer, actually, you're just parrying me out to the side and then get me the hit. So what I want you guys to be understanding is, once I've got the stringer, I've got to keep that stringer. I've got to keep it solid until I've got him on my hilt. And then at that point, I'm still not letting go of the blade. I'm riding down it until I hit him. Okay? Your goal is to get your opponent's tip somewhere around your hilt. Once you do that, there's nothing they can do except get the hell out or some wild parry thing. All right? So, back to what we were doing. We're rushing through this. The thing I want you guys to be able to do is understand these concepts and then practice them. And we'll talk about practice at the end of all this. But back to your pairings. This side stands still. This side step forward, stringer, and then try and go into a, from wide measure, a good thrust. Capture their tip and slide into them. You'll need to close it a little more because he's tall. Yeah. So extend that arm. So you want to try and, yeah, so you want to get around there. Then just ride that. There you go. There you go. Good. Good, good, good. The first one, get that point out. Second one,
Because otherwise, if you're just doing that, there's a possibility I can pop up over and thrust as I parry out with the dagger. So you might have to kick your hand up just a little bit higher.
don't feel nervous about doing that. Go ahead and get
Higher and
your
just a
sword out
little
there as
bit
long as
over
your
so
sword
I
is
can pop up.
you should be safe. Okay. The classical fencing style is good for small swords, but for rapiers, there is a whole lot of this weight going forward. All right, one more and then switch sides. I'm going to teach you guys the three parts of my lunge. It's a capoferro lunge, but you can also do it with Fabris. You can do it with anything else. The first part of a good lunge is the sword comes up. The second part of a good lunge, bend at the waist, the foot stays planted, so you are now threatening your opponent even more. And the third part is the knee bends, or even you take that step, okay? So what we're doing here, as an example, I'm going to stringer his blade without moving that foot. I'm going to gather into the point as much as I can. Then when I've gone as far as I can, I'm rolling the rest of the way on my foot, okay? I've got him blocked out. So try not to take multiple steps to get into your opponent. Try to reach for it first, using your body, and then follow through. Make sense? You can do this also with a forward Fabris stance. It's just that you're already mostly leaning anyway. So you don't have as much extension to fool them. You can also do it with I'm not very good at classical fencing. At the classical fencing stance, you still have some room that you can move in. You can lean in. Make sense? These will all come into tactics in a minute we'll talk about. But think about stringering, closing in toward your opponent's point without moving that front foot. And then, once you're as far as you can go, that front foot then glides, and that's when you do the thrust. All right, switch sides. All right, now who's standing still this time? Okay, so this side stands still. This side closes in on the inside. Try and get that point toward your guard, and then fall into the lunge. Exactly. Do it again. Take a step back. Close in stringer. First position. Now lead the way. Good. Yeah, good. Okay, good. Try if you can. If you can capture her way up here, that's the best control. If you end up touching blades down there, she actually has enough control that she may be able to pick you out before you hit. So you're wanting to try and make contact and stay up around this part of her blade as much as you can. Okay. Yeah, be careful. You just ended that. with your point on his guard.
Okay.
Okay? So try and maintain that force. Even if it means hitting high, whoops, hello, hitting high because you're going through.
Okay.
All right, really quick. What is this thing? What is this part of the sword?
Guard.
What does the guard protect? Meh. Your face, usually. If you're doing good rapier, your face.
We'll let him watch this.
There you go. So, if Jeff is throwing a shot at me, he's got to hit me in the face. If I'm throwing a shot at him and I don't get this up, he's still got to hit me in the face. So, when I'm drilling my good lunges, this is especially true of single hand, I'm looking down my blade. When I drill, I'm looking down my fingers or I'm looking down my thumb. If my hand falls, my head is open. So if you can see the entire length of your blade nice and easily, your head is open. All right? Understand what I'm teaching you is the ideal positions. This all falls apart in fights, but that's how you start using tactics to get yourself back in gear. But if you're not practicing the ideal, it's definitely not going to happen when you're trying to fight. So Jeff and I are fighting. I'm going to try and hit him. I want to keep my face happy. So I am now here looking, barely seeing my blade, but he cannot touch my head. Okay? So yes, this does protect your hand, clearly. But one of the reasons it's built the way it's built is that it also, once you're firing correctly, creates this cone that shoots their point over your head. All right? So with that, go back and do this one more time and think about that. One thing I want you to start thinking about is not sword play. It's not sword. When you fire,
Yeah, you're going straight on.
right now you're firing and you're coming up, and you're coming up. So one of the ways to find your range is seeing your range down, coming up. Okay? So that one change will keep you connected with the earth and will get you under the blade object. All right, any questions on this? So, there was a book published, well, not published. There was a book found that was never published. That's kind of a master class on Capoferro and Fabris. It's the Vienna Anonymous is what we call it. And one of the interesting things that he highlights, he read Capoferro and he's writing notes on Capoferro. He also read Fabris and he's writing notes on Fabris. One of the things he gets at that those two books don't talk about very, very well is the whole point of what we're trying to do is to get as close to our opponent as we can. So I'm stringing Jeff. If Jeff is just going to sit there lamely and not do anything, I'm going to keep coming in until he just lets me reach out and poke him. All right? That is a really good fight from my point of view. Even if we don't do that, if he disengages, I'm going to try and close as he disengages hard. So string your blade. As he disengages, I'm going to try and close and keep closing until once again I can poke him. All right? So part of the point of keeping yourself safe is being able to inch in every time dummy here does something that isn't good. Now, the hand thing is a somewhat not good. The foot thing, if I can get him to take a step like way over here, boom, that's a huge not good thing. So by stringing your opponent, you're trying to make them make movements that aren't hitting you, that are a very small sliver of time that you can then take another advantage. All right? You can watch a lot of fights, and I'm very guilty of this, where Jeff and I are like, disengage, and neither one of us are taking advantage. We're just now playing with blades. So what we need to be doing, actually, is I need to be very, very aware that as I close my blade, as he makes a motion, I should take that motion to make a better motion for myself. All right? So controlling your blade gets it out of your way, makes you safe enough to close distance, to get closer to your opponent, and eventually set up some really interesting tactics that I'll try to get to tonight, but I also may overfill your cup, so I'm trying not to kill your brains. Does that make sense to everyone? All right? It's kind of like if you have a shield, your opponent's just going to point at your shield, you can keep sneaking in on them until you just go pokey pokey and sneak back out again. This is your shield. This blade, putting him in this pocket is your shield. All right? Let's see. We just covered the thrust. Let's do, I said I wasn't going to, but let's do it anyway. We're going to do some lunges. We're going to go through arm, waist, leg lunges. Just a few of them so you guys can get an understanding of what I'm getting at. So my mundane school is Tattersall School of Defense. It's out of Southern California, and I'm a teacher in it. This is, if you ever see Tattersall teachers, you will see this lunge. This is what we teach. All right. Take position. This line, take a step back. Look at each other. My stance is this. Here's a 100 degrees of my feet. If you're going to lean back on your back leg, you need to not do this or even this. You need to catch yourself on your back knee, okay? If you're gonna stay neutral, your feet can be in various places. But understand, if you're gonna weight back, here's one of the things that happens. You can ask Alessandro how it feels. If you're weighted back on this back leg, when you launch off of it, what happens is this knee starts bending in to load it, and then you fire. He tore his ligaments doing that, just stepping, not doing anything else. So, what you're wanting to do when you're standing, mechanically, my knee is over my toe. It is catching me. This is a back spring. When I lunge, this is my front spring. My knee is over my toe. So if I'm back weighted, this is how I'm gonna be. Okay, that's the Capoferro stance. I won't beat on that anymore. Point being, if you're neutral, do what you feels right with your feet. I'm gonna be back weighted, okay? The first thing from a third stance, quillions up and down, is I extend my arm. I'm just gonna do it in third right now. The second thing, foot's planted, I'm bending at the waist. So I'm now drawing my blade up toward their tip effectively, trying to get their tip to my guard. The third thing is I bend that knee and I fire into a lunge. All right, let's do that. Take whatever stance you're comfortable with. First thing is extend the arm. Second thing is let that waist bend a little bit. You're getting closer to them. Third thing is let that knee bend. Now recover back. Keep your sword out until you're recovered back. Then drop the sword. If I'm up here and I drop that sword, which I have done, I'm gonna get hit. After blows are a thing. All right. Stance. Sword comes up. Bend the waist. Bend your knee.
Or step if you're the other school.
Recover back. Drop your sword. All right, and I do 3 more. Sword comes up. Bend at the waist. Bend your knee. Recover back. Drop that sword. 2 more, and I'm going to watch you guys. Take your stance. Sword comes up. Bend at the waist. Bend at the knee. Cover back. Then drop the sword. Last one. Take stance. Sword comes up. Bend at the waist. Bend at the knee. Recover back, keeping the sword up. Drop the sword. All right, does that make sense to people? Some things to note. In our nice computerized world, I see a lot of people, now not here, when they do lunges, you'll get this thing where the thigh goes in and the knee and toe are actually subdividing the middle of the body. Technically, mechanically, your knee is still over your toe, but this is a very weak stance that causes problems and it makes you fire off to the side of your opponent. So one of the things I want people to understand, I want this knee, this hip, this toe to still be coming up the right side of my body, or left side for you weirdos.
You know who you are.
So you want this to be a straight line down to the floor. You want to be able to touch your thigh and your calf with what I'm doing right here. Otherwise, if you can touch one but not the other, you've got that weird angle going on. And this is very common with people like coders, or actually something that I found that's neat is bike riding actually builds this side muscle. So it pulls my leg up. But think about this when you're drilling. When you're lunging, you need to have good mechanics. You need to have a good, strong, mechanically sound leg. You need to not be pointing your knee. You put your toe in. You need pointing your opponent. You need to be able to stab your toe and touch your blade with your knee, so you are directly over your knee, but also that line needs to continue up your right side or your left side. The other interesting thing about this, part of a good lunge, part of a good thrust, is these muscles under here, okay? Ledia has had some problems recently with her elbow. She's been compensating. She has not been supporting her sword here, she's been supporting with her arm. So her elbow is starting to wear out. So she's now been doing shoulder and back exercises to build that thing up. So for instance, one of the things I tell people to do a good side plank, because this is building the structure that you want your thrust. Because if I have a weak structure, someone like Joss can absolutely force my hand offline because I'm trying to fight him with these muscles and not these muscles. All right? Those of you who've taken martial arts, it's like the Kung Fu spear hand. This is now just a very straight, strong spear. My body is what's driving it in. So if he tries to force against me, my body weight is what's taking this thing to him, okay? If I'm weak up here and he throws that same parry, this is what happens to me. Does that make sense? You lunge, the power from your lunge comes from your body weight, not from your arm. I'm going to pick a button, and all I need to do is extend my arm to that button. My arm's not going to move. My body's taking me into that button. If I try and jab, my point control widens by about this much. But if I extend my arm, I can usually hit that button line pretty closely. So the way to stay safe and the way to have good structure, your arm extends first, your body drives the sword in. Your body is what is moving the sword back and forth. Does that make sense? It's something to practice. It's something to think about.
Place your shot, don't throw it.
Place your shot, don't throw it. And the other aspect of that is this. No swordness. If I am jabbing, once I launch here, I have no control of what's happening to the sword. If Jeff is stepping in, it's going to be pretty awful. If I have now a straightened arm, I start lunging at him and he starts lunging at me, I have the ability to absorb that shot. So not only is it more accurate, not only is it proper mechanics, I have the ability to then bend my elbow, step beside it, and do different things that I don't have while I'm jabbing with my body weight. Okay? Interestingly enough, and this goes into cut and thrust too, good mechanics is also good sword play. Using your body correctly is actually the right way to do things. All right? What time is it?
10 of 10.
10 up, okay. Real quick, any questions now? I've given you guys a lot. I'm going to start into tactics, how we can use this to do things. Yes, sir?
How would you work on something like this at home?
If you have a mirror, you should use said mirror and lunge into it. Look at the way your body's lining up. Whenever I'm doing a lot of my lunges, I almost start off with the first 25 or 50 being very slow, being arm, waist, knee. And then I think about, how do I feel? If you notice, that one was actually off balance. How do I feel? How are my feet? My feet, the balls of my feet should both be pressing into the ground. From here, they're pressing into the ground. From here, they're pressing into the ground. The balls of my feet are actually working. I'm not on the heels right now, okay? Recover back, and drop the sword. Again, check out my stance. So the first 20 to 50, you're going slow, you're checking yourself out. Then you smooth out into a nice lunge. This is a nice lunge in 4. My palm is up. Go into a nice lunge in 2. And again, you feel like you're throwing the sword out there and it's pulling you the rest of the way. I'm going to throw my sword. It's going to pull me into the lunge. I'm going to recover and pull it back again. Does that make sense? Use a mirror. Think about the mechanics of your body. If you start feeling weight in your elbow, think about doing shoulder exercises with 1 pound weights. Just different things. Hold your arm out for a while you're watching TV. Get some good exercise. Lift it over your head. You want to build up these muscles and your entire shoulder system. So, repetition. I can usually fall into a perfect lunge without giving it thought. That is where you need to be to do good tactics. If you are still thinking through individual things, you're not going to pull off very good tactics. Here's an interesting theory. Let me get a drink. I'll tell you an interesting theory. I call this the language of swordplay. So, if a sword extension is a word, bending at the waist is a word, bending at the knee is a word, I've now created a sentence. That sentence is my lunge. Okay? Let's say stringering and a disengage is another sentence. So, I stringer Jeff and I make him disengage and I catch it. That's another sentence. Now, I combine those two sentences and I have one sentence where he disengages, another sentence which is my lunge. That's a paragraph. Until you can start thinking in simple paragraphs, tactics aren't going to help you much. And by that I mean your lunge sentence should come out without thinking about it. All right? You should not think through the individual parts of your lunge when you're fighting. You should flow. When I'm thinking through a fight, I'm thinking in multi-set paragraphs. I'm thinking in all the different holes I'm going to try and create, how I'm going to get there, and then I go forward and I unleash whatever I can. That allows me to have different plans in my head. I don't have to think through the individual motions. Does that make sense to everyone? All right. With that, let me talk real quickly about tactics. Then we'll be done, and I'll wrap up with a talk on practice. So what you've now learned is how to stringer your opponent, how to keep yourself safe while you're entering into distance, okay? He's pointing at me. I know he knows what he's doing. I'm over his sword. He's still pointing at me, but he has a really good idea that if he tries to do anything, I'm going to counter it, all right? So, one of the things that I have now done, I've taken this target probably off the radar. Let's make it real simple. I've now taken this target off the radar. I've also offered up this nice hole for him. So the tactic I've just done is taking away one of his options, but giving him another one. Now, if this plays out without me thinking any further than that, he's going to do a disengage, and he's going to hit me. But, since I'm calling this a tactic, I know what he's going to do. I know what hole I've just given him. So, I've covered his sword. I am opening up my face and saying, hi! And if he takes advantage of that, I knew it was coming, right? Speed is one thing. Telling your opponent where to go is a whole different ball of wax. So the whole point of extending your sword out in a stance, and the whole point of stringering, is to start forcing your opponent to make decisions. All right? Real quick on my theory of styles of swordplay. There are three very general styles of rapier play, probably all swordplay. The first style is what you start learning when you're first picking up a sword usually. And that is, I'm going to try and get around his sword, and I'm going to try and hit him. It's as general as that. But usually it involves, I'm going to try and get around something. Oh, the other part of it is, I'm going to try and guess what she's going to do before she does it. Okay? The second style is, I'm going to stand and give an opening and invite my opponent to come in and do something. This is, think Alessandro, think Brian does that very much. If you haven't thought Gage and Natalia, stand still and invite you to come in. Very effective. Marcelli actually wrote an entire book about this in 1682. But the next step for me, I consider a next step, I'm a snob, is the Capoferro style, which I am not only going to open up something for you, I'm going to try and control you going there. I'm going to try and make sure I have control of you making that decision. My body is divided into 4 quadrants here when I have my sword. Upper left, upper right, lower left, lower right. My brain can hold basically 3 choices in it at one time. No, you're left. Can you go right? Yeah. Okay. If I close him off from this option here, I now have really 3 options to think about. So the next thing I need to try and do is force him to take the one I want. Nonetheless, I have my ideal option, and then I have a couple others that I can still keep in my head to block. So tactically, I am closing off one of his options and forcing him to take another one. This is how I am trying to outspeed him sword fighting. I'm not going to be faster than he is, but I'm going to know where he's going before he goes. And as well, the motion to disengage, go ahead, go back, is a lot faster than the motion, do it again, to stop that disengage. Oh, sorry. There, to stop that disengage, okay? So this motion is bigger than that motion. So I'm trying to control the middle, make him take a choice that all I've got to do is correct it. As he's taking that choice, I'm also going to step in and stab him in the head. Does that make sense? I think I've filled your brains for quite a bit now. Oh, yeah. This is the beginning of tactics with the rapier. I also teach a class, I've taught a class just a few months ago on getting to third intention. To get to third intention, you have to understand what we just learned. And you have to practice it. You have to work through it and get your body to understand this. So now I'll break real quick into my talk on practice. Hey Joss, how do you get better?
Practice, practice, practice.
And how do you practice? Tell me how you practice.
Learn, then do slow repeatedly at home, then check learning against an opponent, and then against an expert, and do it.
Okay? So yes, one part of this is practice a lot on your own, think through things. You won't do a good lunge until you've done a good 10,000 good lunges, especially not in a free fight, okay? You have to have all these movements built into your body before you will really do them well under pressure with adrenaline flowing. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, when we're doing free fighting, it is my opinion that it should not be your goal, especially the people in this room, with 2 possible exceptions. It should not be your goal to hit your opponent. 3 exceptions. It should be your goal to pull off the right motion, and if you pull it off right, the end result is that you hit your opponent. But you should step out on the field against every opponent and have 2 or 3 things you want to work on and work on those things. You're not point hunting, because if you're point hunting, you're not practicing, okay? If you're point hunting, you might be learning bad habits. You might be starting to fling a lot. You might be starting to open yourself up to things you don't know about. If you go out there with an idea, like for instance, the first idea you might want to have after this class is, I am going to go out there and make my opponent hit me in the right shoulder. I am going to stringer them and control their blade to where I have made the choice for them where they're going to hit me. Now, you're going to get hit a lot in the right shoulder, okay? Good practicing means you're probably going to get hit a lot because you're working on something. Then you build on that. Okay, now I've gotten him to hit me 5 times in the right shoulder. I'm going to try and slink up there and block it the next time. And you start building little by little. But you should never go onto the free fighting practice field without a plan of 2 or 3 things that you really want to work on. Otherwise, you're not practicing, you're just flinging swords at each other. So this is my theory of practice, but it's also a lot of other martial artists' theories of practice, a lot of strip fencers' theories of practice. The tournament field is where you put it all together and you try and hit your opponent by turning your brain off and all of your body works correctly. That said, even at Jacques' level right now, you shouldn't be in a tournament really wanting to win it. You should be challenging yourself against each opponent. You should be seeing, oh, I get a chance to fight Master Brian in a adrenaline-filled fight. How am I going to hold up? How are the things I've been working on going to hold up in that fight? This also takes the weight off of your shoulders of having to try to win. So you can have a good fight and still lose it. If you walk away from that thinking, oh, I saw that thing that I did and I need to fix it, I think that's a good fight personally. You've had a success. Or if I've seen that Jeff has a hole, he just hit me before I took advantage of it, I'm like, ping, got him next time, right? So, so anyway, all that to say, practicing is a thing you should do. First off, as Josh said, working at home, getting your individual motions to work correctly. Second off, at practice, drilling those motions against someone who's trying to keep you from doing those motions. But again, limit what you're working on in any free fight to 2 or 3 things. Your brain's not going to handle much more than that. If you find you're getting frustrated, take a step back, pick a new thing to work on. If they're just slamming you left and right, rewind. Or if,
Or just tell them this isn't working, this is what I want to work on, so keep helping work it through too.
yes, you can do that. That turns into, to me, more of a paired drill.
Okay.
If they know what you're working on and trying to help you work on it, that's less of free fighting, more of a paired drill. Still, absolutely
Or
valid.
after you've been trying it, it's not working, then you stop and say, this is what I did.
Right. And the other thing that we sometimes have to do, if I find I've hit someone 5 times in a row, I may dial it back and go for a more subtle or experienced thing and try and pull it off that I haven't pulled it off before. Because whatever I was doing was working well enough, I need to dial it back so that my opponent doesn't get really, really frustrated with me at the same time. So that to me is just being a good partner person. All right. I think we're good. I'm not going to fill your heads with much more unless you want to. Are there any questions on any of this? Shocked, there have been no questions. Questions? To the camera? Yes, ma'am.
So when you're doing the stringers, what angle should your blade be at compared to this?
So,
Not this kind of angle, but like.
Yep. So, this cutting edge should be toward my blade. There, so you should cant it in that way. If I'm on the outside, the other way, yes. Now the thing that I do,
This is the strong.
yeah, the strong cutting edge. The thing I do is as I'm approaching your blade, I will cant mine. Once I've actually gained it, now I'm flat. Now my queens are flat. But until then, what I want to do is be ready for you to then switch sides and go the other route. If I am going full out flat back here, when you switch sides, I have a much bigger motion that I have to take to go again. So I'm trying to just get there, and then if you switch sides again, bam. But now my queens are flat. Okay? So when you extend, actually track the blade. If, for instance, if I'm going to go under Jeff, if he's going to shoot high at my head and I'm going under, I may actually put my queens way up. So I'm still tracking him. But my point being, once you've extended, your queens should be fairly flat. You're tracking his blade. You've got it locked out.
And that gives me a longer distance to go around.
Yep. If I'm here, he just has to go around my
I
guard.
don't have to go, I just go drop it, that's
Right. So the queens also play into this. That's exactly right. You're creating a much bigger circle he has to get around. But yeah, so stringering, you're just canting a little bit. Once you go into the full lunge, then you're flat. Flat in 2, flat in 4. All right? Okay. Something else occurred to me, but now I can't remember. Anyway, this is the quick and dirty. This class would take probably 3 days to get to where we just got. So you guys got a lot of little pieces that you need to go home and start thinking about. Again, drill at home, or come up here and do drills for a while by yourself. Grab a partner, do paired drills, then go free fighting and do this stuff. Do not expect to be able to pull any of this off that I told you in free fighting for the next little while. You have to drill these things into your body. You have to be able to feel it. You have to be able to know what's going on. You have to be able to drop into a good lunge without ever thinking about it before you can get to where we just got. But it's not that hard to get there. Make sure you're practicing with good structure. Make sure that you're not tearing your shoulder or your knee up. I think that's about it. Thank you, people.
Thank you, Master Aaron.
Thank you.